Did you read The Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken and absolutely love it? Did this love make you want to read Alexandra Bracken's newest book, Lore? Are you curious if Lore is worth your precious time? Well, I'm here to tell you definitely no, and I'll tell you why. So the basic premise of this book sounded really good to me. Basically, every 7 years there's 1 week called Aegon, where 9 gods become mortal because it's punishment for a past rebellion against Zeus. And there are 12 different families who are allowed to hunt these gods, and if they manage to kill one, then they can have all of their powers and immortality. During the last Aegon, the main character, Lore's family, was killed, and Lore decides to put this whole thing behind her, and she tries to escape it. But during the next Aegon, she gets pulled back into it to avenge her family, and that's basically where the story takes us. So I don't have too many good things to say about this book, unfortunately. I think Alexandra Bracken used a lot of good imagery, which made it more realistic to really think about all of the things that's happening in the book, which I always like. And there was a lot of plot twists and high tension, which made it a little more interesting to read. And really my favorite part of this book is the cover. You can see it's just really pretty. It's kind of simple, but I really like the colors that are used. It's like kind of 3D. She did this with The Darkest Mind series 2, where all the letters are raised, and on this one all of like the snake hairs are like raised too. So that's just like a little detail I really like when I'm reading a book. It's just kind of satisfying when it's all raised. So really, that's my favorite part. So my list of cons is quite a bit bigger. I think Alexandra Bracken didn't build the story up enough in the beginning. She really just rushed into it. And I like it when authors include action at the beginning because no one wants to read a book where it just goes on and on explaining without any action for a long time. The way she did it just felt really sloppy and rushed. She really needed to build up the world a little bit more and build up the characters. There were some things that happened at the very beginning that seemed like they definitely could have been really good plot twists later on, but because they came so fast without all of the explaining, it just seemed like it didn't have much of an impact, and it definitely could have if it came a little later. Also, the main character was kind of, I don't know, I don't really want to say annoying because she wasn't like getting on my nerves all the time, but I don't think she was written too well. She was very indecisive for it seemed like no reason. For example, at the beginning, she just decides she wants to put all of the Aegon behind her, and she doesn't want revenge for her family, but then someone asks her, like, what do you really want? And she's like, I want to avenge my family, which doesn't really make sense. Like, maybe she was just kind of lying to herself at the beginning. I just feel like that change of heart wasn't really written too well. Also, later on, when we get a flashback, as a child, she says, like, I'm gonna become the best legend ever and everyone's gonna know my name. And she talks to some guy who she really doesn't like at all and doesn't really respect either. And he says, oh, you're not gonna become a legend. And she's just completely taken this to heart and she thinks, I'm never gonna amount to anything, I'm completely worthless. And I think it would have taken a little bit more for her to be completely taken down by that. So the main god in the story is Athena, and I think she was not portrayed correctly at all. She's supposed to be the goddess of wisdom, obviously, but she seems to really hate new inventions in modern technology. And I might be able to get that if she'd been staying at Mount Olympus during the periods of time where the Aegon wasn't happening, but because this is a punishment for her rebellion, she is always on Earth. So I feel like if she was always here, she would be adapting with the times, and especially since she is the goddess of wisdom, I think even if she wasn't on Earth that she would like all our new technology and stuff. But in this book, she's just kind of portrayed to just really like the old ways and doesn't like change. Also, I think that all of the characters kind of act like they're from the 15th century, which doesn't make sense because this is set in present day. So I feel like I get that there would be some traditions that would make it seem a little more old-fashioned, but I really liked the premise of this book, how it was Greek mythology mixed with present day. It just didn't feel like present day to me because they all acted just not up to date, which I didn't really care for. Also, the writing at times could be kind of confusing. I'd have to reread paragraphs just to kind of understand what was happening. It was just a little hard to follow at times. So basically, I think this book was kind of a waste of my time, unfortunately. I really wanted to love it because I love The Darkest Mind so much, and I know Alexandra Bracken is such a good author, so I really had high hopes for this book. It was just very underwhelming. And I know when I was reading The Darkest Minds, there were definitely slow parts in the middle, but then the end was just so good, and I just kind of assumed when I was reading Lore, there were definitely a lot of slow parts, and I felt like, oh, it'll get better, this is just kind of what she does. It starts off a little slow and then gets better, but unfortunately that was not the case. The end just followed suit with the rest of the book and kind of sucked. I know that Alexandra Bracken is capable of more. I feel like this book was kind of like a rough draft. It just needed more world building, some character development, and just a few other tweaks, and I think it could have been great because she really did have a good idea with this one. It definitely could have been a great book. It just kind of missed the mark. So for my star rating, I'm unfortunately going to have to give this 2 stars. It just was not my favorite book. It felt like a chore when I was reading it. I never wanted to pick it up and read it. Even books that I don't really love, when I'm picking them up, there are at least some good parts that I'm excited to see what happens. But this book, I was just not attached to the characters. The plot was just like meh for me. So I never really wanted to read it. And there were a few good things happening with the plot once in a while. It seemed like it could have been a little interesting if it just had some of the tweaks I mentioned earlier. So that's why it's not a 1 star, but yeah, definitely wouldn't recommend. If any of you guys have read this book, please leave your thoughts in the comments below because I'm very curious to hear what you think. I was looking at the reviews on Goodreads, and for some reason there were like a lot of good ones, which I'm not really sure why. I don't really get that. But if you read this book, please let me know what you think. Also, if you have any other questions or comments for me, just leave it below and I will be sure to reply. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next Monday.